Hello everyone, Tom with Capo Fetish. Today we're going to talk about some unlikely forerunners of punk. So none of these artists have anything to do with punk or these albums that I'm going to showcase, but they're highly influential. Musicians, fans have cited these acts, artists, albums as very, very influential to the punk music scene that would follow decades later. Okay, so we're going to start off here with an artist from the 1930s, Woody Guthrie. Totally a forerunner of punk, very anti-authoritarian. He wrote about the working class. He protested social injustice. He had all the DIY ethos in place. Even this picture alone, this machine kills fascists on his guitar, pretty much says it all. Now, this is a CD sampler from his 4-CD box set called My Dusty Road. This came out in 2009. I found it for like $0.25 at a sale maybe a year or two ago. And it's just a great sampler. Some of his, well-known tracks like This Land Is Your Land, Talking Sailor, Hang Not, Slip Not, Pretty Boy Floyd, which the Byrds covered on Sweetheart of the Rodeo. Here we are, an early forerunner of punk, Woody Guthrie from the 1930s. And at some point, I'd like to get this box set. It'd be pretty cool to have. It came out in 2009. So again, Woody Guthrie. The sampler is called My Dusty Road, a CD sampler, a definite forerunner of punk. Let's move up a little bit, a couple of decades later. How about Frank Zappa, right? This guy had all the DIY ethos of punk rock, but he hated punk rock. But when you think about Zappa, totally anti-establishment, challenging the music industry constantly, stood up for free speech. Remember 40 years ago, I think one of the weirdest images I ever saw was Frank Zappa and Dee Snider of Twisted Sister at that congressional hearing about free speech, and when they were slapping those labels on records, So he was there with Dee Snider, just fighting for the cause against censorship. He mocked the counterculture on this album here. We're only in it for the money. He had disdain for phonies and completely DIY artists. You cannot even put Frank Zappa in a box. Completely his own thing, a complete singular artist. I mean, I'm just still discovering his stuff after all these years. I mean, I'm just kind of gotten through like maybe a quarter of his discography, if that. But there's always something cool to discover in the Zappa discography. There's always some surprise, change in music, incredible stuff. So definitely a forerunner of punk. Just judging from his attitude and the whole DIY approach of Zappa and not giving a fuck. So Frank Zappa is definitely one of those forerunners of punk. Let's move on to a country artist, Johnny Cash. This is the Live at San Quentin album. Guy wrote about the struggles of the working class, spoke about outsiders. He had a rebellious spirit. He wrote about marginalized people. That photo of Cash where he's flipping off the camera was taken from the soundcheck of this particular performance here at San Quentin. Just a rousing performance here. Just Cash, this is, the closest thing to country punk, right, in 1969. And he pretty much kept this attitude throughout his entire career, and I think that's why he has so much respect. He's so authentic, Johnny Cash, right? He had his ups and downs, and then he had that late career resurgence with those albums, those Americana albums. Rick Rubin. Some are just really incredible. That last one, or the one where he does that version of Hurt from Nine Inch Nails, is really, really powerful. Right here, though, he's probably at his most, this along with Folsom Prison, the Live at Folsom Prison album, this along with that, probably his most punkish type album, should we say, even though he wasn't punk. But the attitude is there. It was always there with Johnny Cash from the beginning. And if only like some of these modern country artists could learn a thing from Cash or Willie Nelson or some of these real authentic artists, because all we get now is just this watered down country we've been hearing for decades now. It's just pathetic. The real deal, Johnny Cash, definitely a forerunner of punk. Jim Morrison. How about Jim Morrison, right? Doors are definitely not punk, but there's punk spirit in Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison pretty much set the template for a crazy, demented frontman, right? So influenced, even Iggy Pop saw him as an influence. When he saw them in '67 in Detroit, he saw Jim Morrison, you know, fucking around with the crowd, you know, basically mentally abusing the crowd, these preppies out in this college audience. And he thought, I can do this. I could totally do this. And Iggy took it to the extreme. But Morrison really was the first, I think, true person that set the whole punk thing in place on stage. Drunk all the time, fiery, unpredictable. Of course, there's that Miami concert from '69. You ever heard that whole thing? It goes on for like about 45 minutes, the bootleg. There's something really compelling about it, but really disturbing as well, hearing that whole Miami performance. You know, they're going on and they're doing when the music's over, and the band's just keeping it together during that spoken word part in the middle, and he's just raving and ranting. Come and love my ass, he says, you know. Get up here, you know. Just really, really something else. Jim Morrison, definitely a forerunner of punk, without question. How about Bob Dylan? You wouldn't really think of Bob Dylan as a forerunner of punk, but what about those mid-'60s albums, especially the two from '65? Bringing It All Back Home. How about Maggie's Farm? Very, very angry, a full-on protest song. And then you've got Highway 61, where I think he's at his angriest, right? Ballad of a Thin Man, where he's just kind of berating this reporter in the lyrics, you know? Fantastic stuff. Just love it. Stuff like, just like Tom Thumb's Blues, Queen Jane Approximately, Tombstone Blues from a Buick 6, just has that punk attitude. I mean, of course, Bob Dylan would go on to other things after this, you know. John Wesley Harding doesn't have any kind of punk flavor, but I think Highway 61 and Bringing It All Back Home have those moments where you could definitely see Bob Dylan seething. There's a lot of anger, and the music is raw. So I'm throwing Bob Dylan in the mix as a forerunner of punk. Just these particular albums here in the mid-'60s. Highway 61 Revisited and Bringing It All Back Home. Just a lot of punk spirit and rebellious nature. How about Captain Beefheart? That's another one. Very influential to punk and post-punk. This is the only album I have by Captain Beefheart. This is Safe as Milk. I had Trout Mass Replica for maybe about 2 weeks years ago, and I sold it. I probably will re-buy it at some point, but I think this album and that album are probably the most, you know, punk influence kind of stuff. It's just raw. It's gritty. It's like nothing else that came out in '67. It has nothing to do with, like, you know, the hippie dream or the hippie whatever. Artists like Joe Strummer, Johnny Rotten, Devo cite Captain Beefheart as a huge influence. In fact, I read somewhere that Joe Strummer listened to Trout Mass Replica over and over and over again. It was a huge, huge album for him, but very influential on the punk and post-punk scene. Captain Beefheart, very unconventional, very DIY throughout his entire career. You know, he's more of a painter. He's more of like a visual artist, but, you know, he did put out some great music as well. I think this one, of the few I've heard, I've loved this album from beginning to end. It's just really, really good stuff. So Safe as Milk, Captain Beefheart, another forerunner of punk. How about John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band? I know I've featured this album a lot on the channel, but this album really kind of applies to a lot of different genres and styles, and got to throw this in here. I mean, this is like the furthest thing from a year prior with Abbey Road, which was all slick and polished. This is raw, and it's emotional, and it's in your face. The production is super, super it's just bass, drums, guitar, a little bit of piano thrown in, and it's you know, Lennon at his primal scream therapy best. Songs like Mother, songs like Well, 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 I Found Out. I mean, this guy was doing stuff, you know, 20, 25 years prior to Kurt Cobain screaming on Nevermind and In Utero. So just very, very, very proto-punk right here. And it's amazing when you think about just 3 years earlier, you know, he was doing Sgt. Pepper, you know, with the Beatles, you know. So it's just a complete 180 from the Beatles here, showcasing Lennon at his most raw and primal, and very highly influential to the proto-punk scene. Plastic Ono Band by John Lennon. And then here's one that you wouldn't really think would fit in with the whole Forerunners of punk aesthetic. But I'm going to throw it in here because I've heard a lot of people think of this as like, this is a year before the punk thing exploded in 75. This is Genesis' Lamb Lies Down on Broadway concept album, right? It's about a Puerto Rican kid named Rael. And he's kind of trying to find himself through all these surreal adventures through New York City. And this probably features the most raw Genesis material, right? Whereas previous Genesis albums, there's these long, epic tracks, prog tracks. This is more of an art record, right? Art rock record. Songs are shorter. Prime example is the song Back in New York City with Gabriel. His vocal, it is just full on. It's almost Primal Scream. It's just all the way through the song, he is just yelling at the top of his lungs. It's an amazing vocal. And I remember first hearing it when I was in my teens, just going, God, that is unbelievable. I've never heard a vocal like that before. So the songs are shorter. You got this concept about this Rail character, a street punk kid, this Puerto Rican kid, trying to find his way through the streets of New York and find his way, basically. It's like a pilgrim's progress kind of situation here. But the music's not punk, but there are parts that have that kind of quality to them. There's anger and there's darkness. So anyway, Genesis, Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, put out in 1974, a year or two before the whole punk thing exploded. Good stuff. Do you have any more to add to the list? I know there's more. There's more. I'd like to hear from you. Let me know what you think are more forerunners of punk. We're not talking about, proto-punk artists. We're talking about more unlikely forerunners of punk. Let me know in the comments section. Thank you so much for watching. If you dig the content across the channel, press subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.